Hi everybody, and welcome along tonight. My name's Russell Cummings. I'm the project leader for the Horticulture the Next Generation program. Horticulture the Next Generation is a leadership development program that is funded by HAL and Agri-Food Skills Australia, and we've been conducting that program for the last 6 months or so. We've had 50 leaders go through some intensive training, and some of them on the hookup with us tonight. We've also done a little bit of work with some industry development officers, and we've been running online. People have had access to online training programs. We've currently got 60 odd people, plus about 25 industry development officers logged on to online training programs. And we've been running a series of webinars, and also we have a website called Horticulture the Next Generation with a regular newsletter. So if you're not part of, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter yet, would you go to the website and subscribe? We've also got a discussion area on LinkedIn where you can participate in some industry discussion. If you'd like the link to that, then please just send me an email. So that's the program. Just so we're working the technology. We've muted all your microphones so that we don't get too much background noise filtering through. But if you'd like to ask a question, the easiest way to do that is just to type a question into the questions area. So on your panel, the control panel on the right hand side there, you'll see there's an area called questions. You can type a question in there, and then we can either answer you, or we can interrupt and put the question to Jenny. At the end of the session, we'll actually open up the microphones, and those who'd like to ask a question can ask a question to Jenny, and we can have a bit of a to and fro on that. We'll go there. So without further ado, let me introduce Jenny. Topic tonight is industry development. What is it and how can it benefit you? Now, I've known Jenny for a number of years, but Jenny's worked in the industry for more than 20 years. She has a large breadth of experience, from national agronomist to Yates Seeds through to national business manager for horticulture and viticulture, for one of the large rural merchandising companies, and she's run her own consultancy business, which is where I ran into Jenny. In recent years, she's worked with many horticulture industries in some capacity, often around industry development, and she's recently chaired the Pineapple Industry Advisory Committee. Really wanted Jenny to talk to you today about industry planning processes and the importance and the benefits that good planning processes can actually bring to industry, and leverage that on to make, I guess, a heap of benefits for their members. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to Jenny, and look forward to your presentation, Jenny. Thanks.
Thanks, Russell. Thank you for inviting me to speak, and hello, everyone. As Russell said, I've actually now currently work with plant and food research, but in my previous life, and that was up until the beginning of this year, I actually had my own consultancy business, and I worked a lot with industry to help with areas around strategic planning and industry development planning, and also in supply chain development. And I suppose part of that experience is what I want to talk about tonight, and that basically I want to cover off on a number of sort of background areas, and then also present a case study around what I believe is good industry development, and how I think that people within the industry can participate so that industry and businesses within industry can get more out of all of the processes around industry development. So the areas that I wish to cover, sorry, I'm just having trouble getting my slides to go forward here.
Just click on your slide, Jenny. Just gone to the thing, and then it should work.
There we go. So I just wanted to cover a number of topics, and probably doing this quite high level this evening because there's a number of areas here, but it's just to sort of give a snapshot overview of the processes that I suppose industries are involved with in terms of getting outcomes, particularly from levy investment, and how all of those elements can come together to bring benefits to businesses within industry. So we just want to cover off on understanding industry structures, and I know that there's a number of you online that, you know, will understand this because you've been involved with industry for a number of years yourself and sort of know the whole process intricately. But it is quite a complex structure for people that come from outside the industry. And I wanted to talk about what industry development is and how different industries have different needs and some of the rules of thumb around that, I suppose. I also wanted to talk about strategic planning processes and about implementing strategic plans and then finally bring it together in a case study. So the next slide here basically, I suppose, shows the processes around industry structure. So in terms of investment of levy funds and investment in R&D and marketing, there's processes that are observed within industry, and part of that is laid down through a number of acts of parliament that allow industries to raise money or levies from growers, and for that money to be matched and then expended by HAL. So if we look down the left-hand side of this diagram, effectively money is raised from levy payers, and that goes to the Australian government, and then the Australian government actually matches, in the case of R&D expenditure, actually matches that funding, and it is then those monies are then given to HAL, and under a deed of agreement, HAL actually invests that money on behalf of levy payers. So as part of that process, HAL actually takes advice from industry advisory committees, which are made up of industry representatives with that are recommended by the peak industry body, and they provide advice to HAL on what appropriate projects should be funded, and those projects need to be in line with the strategic investment plan for that industry. So so each year there's a call for projects, and that happens around between September and November period, and so those projects then come into the loop. They go to the industry advisory committee to see if they're appropriate and fit the strategic plan, and then if they're successful, then they'll go on, those projects will be invested in on behalf of industry. So that's the basic structure. There's obviously in here a component for voluntary contributions, and that allows external money to come into the funding process, which is something that I believe only the horticulture and meat industries actually have the benefit of. So that's something that that horticulture industry uses quite well to increase investment in R&D. In terms of industry development, I suppose I consider industry development in its broader definition, so everything that helps with the development of industry. So whether that's strategic planning processes or research and development or supply chain development, I consider that all inclusive of industry development. I think HAL has a more defined definition, and they see that as the process of informing and empowering those in horticulture to make better business decisions. So, and they see it as all the activities that are undertaken with the intention of getting adoption of R&D, and they also see it as a mechanism to enable strategic plans to be implemented. And so even though we might have slightly different definitions of what industry development is, I think one of the key focuses needs to be that whatever's done in that industry development space needs to be outcomes focused. And I say that because quite often industry development is thought about by industries as let's put a person on and then we'll get them something to do, which I understand that industries quite often need that support, but the better industry development programs, I believe, start with looking at what outcomes do we actually want and being very clear about that, and then working backwards to work out what sort of resources that they need to get that industry development outcome. So there's different categories of industry development, and you're probably all familiar with different aspects here. So there's a facilitation aspect where you might have someone working with a group of growers or individuals to get to improve their learning and understanding. There might be technology adoption, which might include things like local trials or demonstrations or field days to get uptake of specific technology. The other area is specific training, so there might be training courses that are undertaken to improve industry development. Information, which is just where information is provided to industry, whether it's through newsletters or websites or conferences or that type of thing. And the final area is probably more interactive, where you're having a consultant or an expert person giving support to groups within industry to get the industry development outcome that you're looking for. So you've probably all seen examples of these, and a lot of the good industry development programs actually touch on all of these to get the outcomes that they're looking for. I talked earlier about different industries having different needs, and I suppose there's a couple of rules of thumb. If you look at larger or more mature industries, they quite often have a market focus in terms of their industry development needs, and because the market is probably the limiting factor to increasing profitability within their businesses. So there's enough production within the market, but industries need improved ways to market that product. Whereas with emerging industries, the focus is often on production, because individual growers are looking to get increased productivity or a greater level of production so that they're more profitable, and it's so that it can take them out of that niche aspect. And the other critical aspect, I suppose, that impacts on how industry development might look within an industry is whether an industry is concentrated in specific areas or it's a dispersed industry. So, for example, I'd say here's someone like the banana industry that tends to be a very concentrated industry, might, for example, use industry development officers or people on the ground and have a heavier reliance on those, because it's that person can easily access the majority of growers in a region. Whereas more dispersed industries, the industry development officer approach quite often isn't practical, and it's, you know, a high cost option. So you need to look at other resources or tools and that to get the information out to industry. So that table there has just been taken from some previous work that Hal has done, and it sort of gives an indication of how you might look at industry development or resourcing industry development processes, depending on whether you're an emerging or mature industry and what your grower base looks like. The other factor that might come in there also is the focus of your industry. So if you have if you're a fruit and vegetable based industry, if you have a processing orientation or a fresh product orientation, that can also have an influence on the type of industry development work that you do. So from here, I'd just like to move on to industry strategic plans and investment planning, because industry strategic plans are the plans that sort of underpin the whole industry development area. And there's actually been, I suppose, a slight change in terminology in the last 12 months or so. We always used to use the word industry strategic plan. You quite often now see strategic investment plan. So basically, that strategic investment plan is your strategic plan, but it has the addition of some analysis around where investment should be made against that plan. So it's making it a more robust plan. So the HAL board actually requires all industries that are levy payers to have a national strategic investment plan and for them to do annual investment plans, and that actually feeds up into the documentation and the planning that HAL does with Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, which is part of their deed of agreement for expenditure of levies. So, so it is a critical process in terms of accessing funding. Most industry strategic investment plans are usually 5 years in length, and you know they're based on significant industry consultation and hopefully therefore accurately reflect the needs of industry. So the basis of strategic investment plans from an industry perspective is really about where we are now, where we want to be, how the industry is going to get there, how they're going to measure their progress, and what sort of investment do they need to achieve this. So unfortunately, I suppose in most industries, the investment that is available is, you know, limited, and so really it's about then prioritising where that investment needs to be made. So just in terms of the structure of the strategic investment plan, and you know, a lot of you will know this, but you know, it starts off with a vision or a mission, or some groups use the intent or aspiration of the industry. It looks at the current industry position, so where is the industry at, and where does the industry want to be, and then sets up a series of objectives, and those are usually around supply, demand and industry management. So the supply side of it's really looking at everything that feeds in, so it's your production R&D, your quality, your information about supply to market, biosecurity, so all of those things that impact supply. And then on the demand side, it's about market and consumer research and promotion and factors that will impact on demand, so things like good environmental credentials and food safety and that type of thing. And then the final objective area is usually around industry management, so it's about leadership and industry development and capacity building and resourcing of the industry from I suppose a human perspective, so making sure that you have access to the right R&D resources and marketing resources and that type of thing. And then finally I put there that the objectives need to be SMART, so I think it's important that those objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and timely, and I think that's a really good ruler to run over any of the objectives within a strategic plan, and I think that allows evaluation to occur, and I think that's really critical, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the case study that I'm going to talk to. In terms of underneath those objectives, we've got strategies and sub-strategies to achieve the objectives, and then there needs to be alignment to the government priorities, and I'll just talk to those in a minute. There needs to be an indication of the investment against each of those objectives and some analysis to justify that investment. And then quite often industries and the larger industries will have separate plans around R&D and marketing and communication to support the overall investment plan. The thing that doesn't necessarily sit within a strategic investment plan, but it's important to industry, are those other activities that occur. So it's the activities of the peak industry body, which can't be funded by levies. So they're things like membership and resourcing of the peak industry body and agri-political activities. So quite often industries will have a separate little plan off to the side where they can work on that as a peak industry body. So that's the structure of the SIP, and then I'm not going to go into these in detail, but the government does have a number of rural R&D priorities, and they have an expectation that there'll be consideration of these priorities in the development of the strategic plan. So I must admit I've done quite a number of plans, and it's very I don't think I've ever found anything that falls outside of these, but it's important to keep, I suppose, the objectives and the strategies that you employ, keep them in perspective of these priorities. So just in terms of implementing strategic plans and industry development plans, I just want to quickly touch on some of the challenges and opportunities and the requirements for plans. So in terms of challenges, I think there's an increased focus on return on investment and also expectations of levy payers in terms of there is levy payers are looking to at least get ensure that their industry is maintaining its position, and ideally that it's improving its position, and as businesses within their industry that they're benefiting from the investment of their levies. That's a challenge because it's a constantly changing environment in which these strategic plans are being implemented. So you've got a changing landscape in terms of R&D provision, and there's a lot of changes happening in that space at the moment. There's changes within marketing channels, there's regulatory changes, and all of this is on top of increasing costs for delivery of services. So it's a challenging environment, and plans are limited by the amount of levy investment that is available. I think one of the challenges is that industries quite often try to achieve too many outcomes, and so they end up not doing things well at all because they're trying to spread their resources too thin. So I think there's a need to really focus on what are the key areas that are going to give us outcomes that are really going to benefit growers. And I've spoken to the lack of resources and under-resourcing. And in terms of industry development, I think sometimes there tends to be a focus on employing an IDO, but not necessarily a focus on the outcomes that the industry wants. So the real challenge is to continue to focus on that outcome and sort of make sure that that's being the outcome that's being sought is being delivered in the most appropriate way, and that it's not necessarily just employing a person for employing a person's sake. So I think they're the real challenges in terms of implementing strategic plans and industry development plans. There are opportunities. I think there's opportunities in terms of greater collaboration between industries, so, and that's in respect to both R&D and industry development, and I'm sure that some of that's occurring, and there's been some good initiatives around over the last few years that I hope will continue, where there's a sharing of resources. And I think there's also an opportunity for greater sharing of ideas and learnings from other industries. So, you know, quite often industries have gone through the pains of trying to develop programs, and some of those have been successful and some haven't, but I think there's always the opportunity to ask around and find out who's done things well, and if things haven't happened as they should have in other industries, to take away learnings from that so that your industry doesn't make the same mistakes. In terms of requirements, industries do need well-considered strategic plans so that they can address the challenges and the opportunities, and they also need a really well-considered approach to industry development, and that requires resources going into planning as well. There needs to be focus, so both in terms of the strategic plan, but also in terms of any industry development activities that occur under that. So the strategic plan for industry development, the strategic plan should be providing focus. And there's also a need for strong leadership and industry buy-in. And I think if you want to affect change and you want to get adoption of R&D, that industry buy-in is particularly critical. And there also needs to be appropriate resourcing. So those requirements effectively speak to the challenges and opportunities above. Just really quickly, I'll run through this. I wanted to use the avocado industry and some of their strategies as an example. So the avocado industry had a plan that they set up in 2011 to guide investment over the following 5 years, and they had 3 key objectives: to build sustainable and competitive supply, to increase demand, and to ensure appropriate resourcing and management of the Australian avocado industry. They effectively out of that decided that in their first years they had some very key areas of focus, and that was to ensure that consumers can confidently purchase high quality fresh avocados, that they can maintain the supply-demand balance, and that they have good communication and extension to improve outcomes for industry and industry investors. So they actually had these strategies within their objectives, and they defined them with particular aims that they were trying to achieve. So they undertook consumer research for their first objective to make sure that consumers were getting what they wanted, and they found out that consumers want ripe fruit that they can eat tonight or tomorrow night. They want low internal flesh defects, they wanted mature fruit, and they wanted a ready supply of fruit. And so effectively from there, the industry looked at their industry development plans and looked at how they would enable that to happen. So from their research, they actually set up new industry maturity standards, which was minimum dry matter levels for Hass and Shepherd, and then they set up grading guides to help packers so that packers were packing to that standard. And they've developed an ongoing communication program to highlight issues with growers and the supply chain so that they could get acceptance of these new standards right along the supply chain. So they've looked at everything from the pack house through to the wholesaler, through to transporters and ripeners, and now moving through to consumer level. And what they've been able to do with their R&D is that they've had an ongoing monitoring process, and they've been able to monitor how effective they are at changing the quality levels at retail level. And they've found that over the last 3 years that they've are starting to get an improvement in quality at retail level. So they're starting to see those fruit that were unacceptable to consumers drop from about 30% down to just over 15% in 2011. In 2010, they had a bit of a glitch in 2011, but they're continuing to work on that, and so they've got this continual evaluation and monitoring process happening, and they're continuing to invest in education and training and engaging with industry. They also set up an industry data collection system so that they could get accurate information on flow of crop through the system. And this is important because flow of crop really impacts on quality at the end of the day. If they're able to move product through the system fast, they run into less quality problems with bruising and rots and that expressing themselves at the retail end. And so they've actually set up a fairly sophisticated information system where the industry is able to get information about weekly dispatch and forecasting, and they're able to get seasonal forecasting and wholesale data and plannings information and retail pricing data. So that's been extremely valuable to participants in the avocado sector because it allows them to make informed decisions about managing and marketing of their product. And so the industry is developing weekly and monthly and quarterly and annual reports that are going out to service that that need for information. And so this diagram's just a quick snapshot of some of the reports that they're generating over that period. So I suppose the learnings from that is that the avocado industry's had a very strong focus on the outcomes that was required. It was driven by the industry strategic plan. There's been a really strong emphasis on planning and consultation. They actually don't have industry development officers. They do have what they call program managers who actually oversee that whole area of quality and information, and they're delivering parts of the project and overseeing other parts of the project with external service providers. So they've got a multifaceted industry development approach in that they're using all of those earlier areas I talked about, like facilitation, using expert support, information training, and they're using a whole raft of approaches to get good uptake of R&D. They've had strong leadership and they've got very good industry buy-in, and that's along the whole supply chain. So they've got wholesalers and retailers and everybody participating, as well as growers, and that's been facilitated by good industry consultation and their communication program. And they've got this ongoing evaluation and continuous improvement approach. And so, you know, they have had issues along the way, but they've looked at that, they've corrected it, and they've moved on. And I think it's just taken that whole program from strength to strength. And so the benefits are that they've got the support of the whole supply chain, from wholesalers through to retailers. They've got increasing product demand in a time when they've got increasing supply, and so the sector profitability is maintained, has been maintained, which has been fantastic. And there's also been a very strong change of culture within the industry, and that the industry is working together a lot more effectively, and they tend to take on the challenges together. So you know, that's actually, I think, a very good industry development story. And I mean, there's you know, any number of them out there, but that's one that I'm familiar with, and I think there's some really good learnings from that program that other industries could use. So I suppose wanted to say finally, for those of you that aren't intimately involved with your industries in terms of the industry development processes or strategic planning processes, you know, I really encourage you to get involved with them, because there's a lot of benefits that can come out of it. So I encourage you to participate in those consultation processes or project steering committees or IACs, and to also ask you know, ask your peak industry body where you might be able to get involved, because I think the more involvement there is, the stronger your strategic plan and your industry development plans are. And it's one way to enable your industry sector to gain benefits, and I think that's been demonstrated through the case study with avocados, that there's a lot of opportunity there to improve the profitability of businesses within the sectors if there's good industry development and planning. So, so that's, I suppose, a snapshot of how I see industry development, and it is very much a snapshot, but, you know, I encourage you all to get involved in the processes. So, I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm happy to take any if there is.
Jenny, we had a couple of questions during it, so I'll unmute some microphones here. Trevor, do you want to ask your question? Just give me a second. You should be unmuted now.
Hey, Jenny, Trevor.
Hi, Trevor.
How are you? I suppose, you know, looking at the original, your first slide, of looking at the model, that question, given that you're now doing some work for, in the New Zealand field, you know, is there a better model around? Have you looked at the South African model that's used for R&D activities? Just your comments as to how one might improve the current model.
Look, yeah, it's sort of a bit of a. I've had obviously now some familiarity with the New Zealand model, and I think there's some good aspects to the New Zealand model, and there's some aspects to the New Zealand model that are lacking, that are in the Australian model, and probably the same for the South African model. So I think one of the challenges for industry is around level of investment and I suppose the ability for peak industry bodies to fund the activities that they need to undertake. And so the New Zealand model to some extent addresses that. And with the South African model, I think, you know, for example, over there is, they have a group called Subtrop, which brings together a number of the industries under one umbrella, and I think that's got a lot of merit because they actually do share resources and they still maintain their presence as an industry. However, a lot of their resourcing behind is shared, so it helps reduce the costs. So I think there's some there are learnings from other industries that could be looked at to improve how industry development is delivered in Australia.
Okay, thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trevor. Francis, you got a question as well. I'll just unmute your microphone. Hopefully we can hear you as well. So there we go. Are you there?
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hi, Jenny.
You might have to speak up.
Hello, I can just
Hello, Jenny,
hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear me now, Jenny? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I've just found, you know, that it seems to be a gap between the supply chain and industry, particularly within the vegetables. For example, the retailers, they're not congruent with industry developments. For example, the benefits associated with integrated pest management and issuing non-conformances due to like beneficials. And there have been two non-conformances issued by retailers just this week for lady beetles found on fresh produce. And sometimes, you know, growers think that R&D is going in one direction and, you know, the key stakeholders and the retailers are going in another direction, the opposite direction, and they're not meeting. So I just wonder what we do with this information and how we get all that addressed responsibly, you know, within a very quick time frame. How can we get this situation addressed without having the growers face the risk of retribution? Can something like this be incorporated in a strategic investment plan?
I think it can, and I think it absolutely can, and I think that's about you know, educating stakeholders, and I see that as part of the whole industry capacity building and things like that. And I know that there's greater dialogue occurring between HAL and, you know, the retail chains, and I think sometimes it's just a matter that those conversations, even though you think they may have occurred and should have occurred, that they necessarily haven't occurred. And so I think it's a matter of, and I'm not saying that's anyone's fault, I think it's just you know, everybody's busy, and you know, and traditionally I suppose a lot of the industries have had a focus on production, not necessarily on the supply chain and marketing side of the industry, and I think some industries are moving to that, and I think as those relationships are starting to develop, then industries can have those conversations with the retailers without it being in a threatening type of tone or whatever, and so there starts to be understanding on both sides of, you know, what the requirement is, type of thing. So I absolutely see that that is something that can go into a strategic plan, and in that resources can go towards educating the supply chain on those type of issues. Does that sort of answer it?
It does, but what happens to the growers that are affected now? You know, they're trying to do the right thing. So, you know, by the time we get around to incorporating it in the next strategic investment plan,
yeah, I know.
It'll take some time.
Look, I'm not familiar, but I mean, I suppose I'd see that as something that, you know, that you could possibly take up with your peak industry body to talk to your retailers about. If they, you know, because if that's, you know, that's it's a legitimate concern, and you know, and the retailers, you know, in terms of, you know, looking at looking at practices that have a lower environmental footprint and are, you know, more environmentally friendly. I mean, they're very, you know, they're happy to support, you know, they want to support those types of processes. I mean, that's sort of a trend across the whole retail sector. So I'd see that they'd be very happy to engage in those types of discussions so that they could at least understand them and see what, you know, what could be put in place to address some of those issues.
Okay. Jared, you said you want to make a comment on that. I'll just unmute you. Yeah. You right? Are you there, Jared?
Hello, Jenny. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes. Yeah.
And Francis, just a very quick follow-up to Francis' comment. I mean, in a way, this comes back to the implementation of strategic plans that you talked about, Jenny. In that, you know, the veggie sector has commissioned some work that was done a couple of years ago, and I was involved in that with others, where we brought that type of issue about non-compliance caused by people undertaking IPM, and the supermarkets were very interested in talking about it through the consultation phase, and strategies were built into the plan to enable those sort of ongoing discussions to start to happen right along the supply chain. But I think, you know, it hasn't been implemented by the industry. So, you know, it does come down to, I suppose, industries who develop these plans then having the discipline to actually take them on board and undertake the implementation in order to, you know, this is going back a couple of years now, so there was ample time to sort of nip that issue in the bud, and also deal with lots of other related issues like, you know, pesticide availability and a whole range of things that were identified as risks along the supply chain related to IPM. So yeah, I mean, I guess I've seen a fair bit of this where things do get identified, but sadly industry politics move on or move in, and you don't always get the implementation that's required.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for that comment. I'll just keep moving on. Donna, you had a question. Would you like to ask that? How's that working for you? You there, Donna?
Hello, can you hear me, Jenny?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, my question was really picking up on one of the items in the case study, and that was the Avocado system.
Yes.
I just wondered how that was developed, whether it was developed from scratch, specifically designed for the purpose, or whether you used any off-the-shelf programs.
Well, what effectively happened was there are a number of countries around the world that were using systems, so in the avocado world, so that was Israel, California, New Zealand, and so the avocado industry actually went out and looked at all of those, and one was web-based, the other two were fax-based at the time, so this was, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, and anyway, they decided that they would sort of take the best of what was available. So they had a look around first, and then basically they developed from scratch. So they worked with Graham Forsyth and Associates. So, and how that program was implemented was it was done on it was rolled out over a period of years, and I mean it's still in a rollout progress because the initial module that was put in was a weekly dispatch module. So pack houses would put in what they had sent out the previous week, and so once they started doing that, and that was on a rolling basis because you had to move from geographic area to geographic area as the harvest progressed basically around Australia, and so what effectively happened was growers started saying, well, or packers started saying, well, it was great knowing what went last week, but really we want to know what's coming next week. So then they put in a 4-week rolling forecast, and then it just kept going from there. So then the next module that was put in was, well, it's nice to know what's coming, but really we need to know what's in the system. So then they put in the wholesale module, which looked at how much supply there was with the wholesalers, and and then they also at the same time developed a seasonal forecast module. So that was asking all of the packers to put in what they expected to supply over each of the next 15 months. And then the last module that they're currently adding at the moment is going back and looking at plantings data and expected supply and working with all the growers. So they've sort of done the loop, if that makes sense. So, you know, and it's been really challenging, I know, for the avocado industry, because it's hard, you know, you've got to get businesses to put in weekly data, so you've really got to get that buy-in. But, you know, the industry has really seen the benefit of it, and they've seen the benefit not only from them getting information, but the confidence that, you know, the retailers have put in the sector, and the fact that they've been prepared to invest in growing the sector, because they can see, they can get good data about, you know, what's coming, you know, about what the expected production is in the next couple of years, or, you know, what the production's going to be in the next 3 months, so they can invest in, you know, promotions and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that system's being used by a couple of other industries, you know, modified, but being used by other industries as well now.
Okay, great. We've got time for one more question. Yolandi, would you like to ask your question, please? I'll just unmute you. How are you? You there, Yol?
Ah, hi. Hi, Jenny and team.
Hello.
Jenny, given the pressures on growers, it's not necessarily practical to increase on what other successful funding models and opportunities you've identified?
You know, there are other, you know, occasionally there comes available other money through, you know, through government sources, I suppose, through the Department of Industry and those type of things. And there's been, I know, a number of programs in the industry that I've worked with where they've been actually able to successfully source funds to assist with industry development. I also think, you know, increasingly there's opportunities to perhaps work with some of the international aid money as well, and that's where, you know, you can get benefit for both Australia and, you know, aid recipient countries as well. So there's some opportunities there. And but, you know, unfortunately, I think a lot of the responsibility of, you know, future funding or increased funding in R&D is going to come back to commercial supply chains in reality.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Yol.
Thanks, Jenny. So what did you mean by the international aid?
Well, you know, there's a number of programs out there through international aid that, and this isn't so much around industry development, it's more around research and development, so more around research, but, you know, like a number of industries that are actually where there's investment being made in R&D programs in the international aid space. There's quite often benefits that are being realised by the Australian industry in terms of R&D support that, you know, so you know, there's opportunities there, and I'm thinking, you know, a number of the tropical industries, for example, there's international aid projects that are occurring that, you know, that the Australian industry benefits from as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jenny. We might have to leave it there. As I said, we'll be recording this session. We'll put it up on the Horticulture Next Generation website. Thank you very much for your attendance tonight, everybody. This will be the last webinar for 2012. We will aim to continue doing a few more into 2013 just to maintain some momentum. It'd be fantastic if you want to, I guess, be kept in the loop about what's going on around this sort of sector, then please subscribe to the Horticulture newsletter off the Hort Next Generation website.